The game that's gained enormous popularity over the past few years, snooker, is on your screen at 2:30 this afternoon. But now it's 12:30 and time for Me and My Car.
Hello and welcome. Well, today's programme is about changing oils. Now, to change oils, you've really got to go underneath your car. So, the first important point here is getting the car off the ground. Now, what we've used here is these ramps here, which you can buy, not all that expensive, to get the rear end of the car up. Now, the other thing to do is to get the front end up. Now, Alan, jacking up the front end is perhaps the more difficult point. Ah, yes, we're going to need some of those, aren't we?
That's true.
Because, I mean, this is what I think you're going to recommend.
That's right. That's the thing to use rather than anything else. These you can buy a pair for about £5.
Yeah,
and these will carry 30 hundredweights without any problem.
Fully adjustable.
Yeah.
Pin and slide up to...
You can set it to whichever height you need.
Yes, yeah.
The thing to do, though, is to look after them when you've got them. Keep them well lubricated and clean. Yeah. And don't be tempted if you lose the pin, because it's only fastened on a piece of chain, to use a piece of bolt. I've seen so many people with a little bolt in there. And you can imagine what happens if the bolt shears.
Shear through, yes. Yeah. And if you're underneath, not very healthy, you know.
That's right.
So, I mean, these are quite inexpensive, and certainly the sort of things, if you're going to do your own servicing, that you should invest in.
That's right.
The same as the back ramps there. OK, all right, I mean, there are other alternatives, I mean, such as what?
Right. Well, blocks. These are a less desirable alternative, if you like. But you can use these on level floors, such as we have here, not on a loose, shingly surface. You know, don't be tempted to do it on the drive if the drive isn't made up. No. But you can use blocks if you build them into a stack with as wide a base as possible on a level floor.
On a level floor,
so
yeah.
You've got to jack the car up first and then build your blocks, if you like, under the car, and then place it.
The other thing, of course, I didn't mention at the back of the car, of course, that we just put a rubber mat underneath there
that's just to stop the
friction moving there. Yeah. But this is the sort of job you can get your wife to help to see you back on those.
Well, you need
to,
certainly, to watch yourself back onto the hoist.
That's right,
Up the ramps.
Now, jacking the car up, of course, I mean, the ordinary wheel jack that is supplied is not really good enough for lifting up the car.
Not if you want the car all four. You can get one corner up, certainly, which is what you're intended to do when you change the wheel. But the jack that you get with a car is supposed to change the wheel perhaps, 5 times in the car's life when you get a puncture?
Yes.
So you can jack one corner and then use one stand if you're going to go underneath. But ideally, if you're going to jack the whole front of the car, you need something like the trolley jack.
That's right. Well, before we go on to the trolley jack, I mean, it's good to just go through some of the silly things that I've seen people do. I mean, I've seen people support cars on pieces of wood stood in an upright position, which is absolute disaster. And, of course, the other thing a lot of people use and think it's really secure is the common old brick.
Yeah, well, that's the absolute don't.
It's an absolute death trap because, I mean, sort of, you know, being in the building trade a lot of my life, you cut a brick with a trowel. And, of course, you've got sharp parts of your chassis, which are almost like the edge of a trowel. And I hope I can do this, but, I mean, one blow and you can cut a brick.
That's right.
And it's the same underneath the car. And that would probably, once it started moving, would shear right the way through the whole...
Yeah, the weight would concentrate on one little sharp edge, you see. And I'll show you the sharp edge under the car.
Yes, we'll have a look at that up on the ramps. Anyway, move that. We come over now to the jack. Now, I mean, a jack like this, I mean, are they expensive, Alan?
Yeah, well, that particular model is a professional one, which we use, and would cost about £70. But you can buy an adequate jack for around 40 from the motor accessory shops.
Well, I mean, if you're using them a couple of times a year, they're soon going to pay for themselves. Or alternatively, you can hire them,
you can hire, certainly.
But, I mean, it's as good to look for a good one. And, I mean, I know this one here is because it's got a nice safety catch on. I don't know, is this standard on all these jacks, Alan?
All that model of jack, certainly.
That lock, you can lock that in, so that's a sort of a good holding device there.
Yeah. And one point is, though, that don't use that in isolation. The jack won't come down, but the car can still rock on the jack. So you need to use the 2 axle stands, too. The 2 axle stands as well, yeah. I mean, this is just for lifting it up. Well, I think what we'll do, Alan, is to release that and put that down. And we'll put him underneath the car and jack the car up. Now, one thing that I do know, of course, is where to put this jack. I mean, you don't put it underneath like the sump. No. On most modern cars, there's a big cross member between the 2 front wheels for the suspension. And you need to be under the middle of that.
somewhere about in there.
Yeah, that's just about right.
So the point is to pick a good, substantial point in which to jack up from and make sure that that...
Fills the valve.
Have to twiddle that round. Do up the valve first. That's it.
That's it.
We're away now. And then just pump the jack up high enough to slide underneath those axle supports.
Yeah. And don't be tempted to crawl underneath to see how it's going.
Not what whilst you're jacking, that's
Not
right.
while you're jacking. If it's going to come down, you don't want to be underneath.
Are we up high enough there, Alan, or...?
Yes, I would think so. Just about at that, Mike.
Are we up? No, we're not high enough.
Yeah, that's it. Well, there's a stand on the other side. That's just about right. Yeah.
Right. I'll just go and slip the other jack in the other side.
Right, just behind the bend in the chassis.
Yep.
There we are.
Because we'll have a look at these positions when we go underneath the car on the rack.
It's easier to show you where they are.
That's
near the
right.
car.
Now, gently lower. How's that?
That's good. Now you can take the jack out altogether.
Right. Well, there we are. That's our car. Well and truly
absolutely
supported.
safe. That's the main
Go
thing.
underneath to do the other jobs. But, of course, unfortunately, we can't get cameras underneath that height. We've got to go over now to the Ford Cortina, which is on the high ramp, which we can have a look at the jacking points and draining off our oils. Well, Alan, first of all, now we can see very clearly now our jacking points, I hope.
Right.
Now, this is the point where I put the jack underneath here.
That's the main cross member between the two suspension units. Don't put it under there. That's
Not on
the
the
engine
sump.
sump.
Right.
So that's where you need to be, right in the middle.
That's where we lift our car up,
That's
OK.
right.
And then to support it on our axle stands here, now those go underneath this chassis member here, is that right?
Yeah.
Making absolutely sure that you clear any brake pipes or any other...
Petrol pipes, brake pipes, whatever.
That's
but
right.
The stand itself will be on the flat part of the chassis,
Yes,
under there.
yeah.
So it's perfectly safe.
So those are the points, and not on the pan itself, because you could push up through it.
Now, the sharp edge we were talking about before is
yes.
out beyond the edge.
Yeah, that's up here, isn't it?
That's right. If you put the bricks on that, the sharp edge will cut through the brick.
That's it,
So that's where you need to be, either with the wooden blocks or the axle stands.
Yeah. OK, so that's the jacking points at the front end.
Yeah.
We've got the jacking points at the back end. If we weren't using the ramps that we are using, yes, we'll take these with us because it's easier to show. Now, where would we actually jack up from?
Under the axle itself, right under the middle.
That's there.
So that pan will go securely onto there and lift the...
We're all right lifting the car up from there, yeah.
From there on in, you can put the axle stands either on the axle itself,
It's,
either side.
either side of the axle.
But on this particular model, you have a brake pipe there, which you would need to be very careful about.
Yes.
So by far the safest place is under the suspension arm itself.
Is to hold him up on there, yeah. So, it's very important, actually, to watch that we don't squeeze up any
Any
cables.
sort of pipes or cables or anything, just keep well clear of them.
Really
and find a secure place to put
Check that out first, yeah. OK. Well, that's the jacking points all dealt with. Now, rear axle, that's got a lubricant in that. Now, how do you go about checking those levels and if there's enough oil in it?
It needs to be checked about every 6,000 miles, the same sort of time as an engine oil change. You don't change axle or gearbox oils now, they're in there for life, but you do need to check the level. And on the Ford in particular, there is a level filler plug, so you've got one plug does both jobs. And what you need to do is to unscrew the plug, and if there is oil spills out of the hole, then there's plenty in.
Yes.
If it doesn't spill out, then you need to dip in with your finger to find out how much.
Yes, there looks like a lot of muck, actually, because there's a square little spigot in there,
That's
isn't
right.
there?
That needs cleaning out.
And in fact, there is a lot of gunge in that. Let's clear some of that out. So, I mean, because the thing is, I mean, you're going to need a special spanner, too, for this, by the looks of it.
Yeah.
And if you don't clear that muck out, it'll never fit in anyway, will it?
Yeah. Well, it needs to be cleaned round the plug as well, so there's no dirt goes into the axle when you take the plug out.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you'd brush off this, in fact, this area.
Get it nice and clean before you start.
So you don't have any... That's a good point, that, Alan. Now, then, this spanner, this is a special spanner, is it?
Yeah, that's a universal spanner with all different sizes of squares on.
So it'll fit almost any car, that?
Yeah.
And not a very expensive piece of equipment anyway, I don't suppose.
But the thing is, you know, it's going to fit all the squares. We've got a square on the axle and another on the gearbox.
Yeah.
So that's the one we need for the
Okay. Now that goes into that...
Into the square.
You find a square that fits, in other words.
That's it. A good secure fit. And then unscrew that.
Yeah.
Now, if the oil spills out, there's enough.
Yes.
If it doesn't spill out, then we've got to top it up.
Have a look, let's see.
In fact, there we are.
Oh, look,
that
yes, there's a good drop there.
Plenty of oil in that one. So that's all that's necessary.
So that's okay then? We needn't do anything with that at all?
Make sure that the plug's secure when you put it back, and then wipe off the drips of oil. There we are.
Not an easy thing, actually, if it does need any refilling. I mean, it's not an easy thing to fill up.
Well, if it does, then you have to put the oil into a filler can like this with a flexible nozzle on it.
So that would fit up into that...
into the hole.
So just like an oil can, isn't it?
That's right. You just continue pumping until the oil spills out.
That's right.
And then
so
put
that's
the plug
easy.
back. So
Yeah.
that's it, no
And
problem.
of course, you'd have to check the right type of oil that is required.
Well, back to the driver's handbook
Again, yeah. Oh, well, that's fairly simple then, Alan.
Yeah.
OK, so that's the rear end of the axle done. Nothing else to worry about down here. That's the oil levers there. Now, we've got the other bits and pieces at the other end. We've got our
We've
gearbox.
got the gearbox to check, which is the same sort of an idea.
And the actual sump of the engine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
You
let's
see,
check,
while you're underneath, you need to be checking in any event for any sort of leak as you go back. You've got a petrol pipe and a brake pipe.
That's right.
You've got leaks from the exhaust system itself, perhaps.
Yeah, somebody's had a go at this, actually, haven't they? They've put some gunge or something around here.
What?
But I mean, these exhausts. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily.
It's not worth fitting them yourself these days.
Cheaper
there are so many exhaust specialists who will fit them free of charge anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, you could patch up a little hole like somebody's done there, I suppose. But I mean, it's not good. I mean, it's so cheap almost. It's just pays you to put on a new system.
Yeah.
But again, check all underneath the car while you're underneath. Yes. Okay, so here we are now.
Gearbox, same idea as the axle.
This is the gearbox.
The problem is that the level plug is way up on the side of the box.
Oh, yes. So well, we won't be able to see that, actually. But, I mean, that is the same, in fact, as the rear axle.
Yeah, take the plug out, and if the oil comes out, there's plenty in.
And that's a sealed unit again.
Yeah. And doesn't need draining.
If it doesn't drip out, we squeeze some oil back in it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly the same way as the rear axle. Now, OK, the sump. I mean, this is our main engine oil, isn't it?
The engine oil is all contained within this sump.
And this does have to be changed, of course, regularly.
Yes, this oil is changed. And you change it about every 6,000 miles. But again, it depends on manufacturers. We're now going to the stage of 12,000 mile oil changes, for instance. But the oil's contained anyway within the sump.
Yes.
It is a tip to have the engine hot when you change the oil so that the oil is thinner and will run out. That way you're going to get rid of most of the dirty oil.
Yeah. And also, another thing, I mean, of course, is having the cap off of the...
Yeah, take the cap off. That lets the air into the top so that the oil will drain out the bottom.
That's right.
It would eventually come out, but it's quicker with the cap off.
That's where you put the oil in, yeah. OK. Right, so now then, this is where you get oil up your arm, I suppose, is it?
That's right, yeah. One tip is take your watches and things off, because if you do get it up your arm, it's easier to wash your hands than clear the watches out.
Right, I'll hold the tray and you can undo the nut. I don't know who's going to get the most, but... but normally you'd have this would be on the floor, wouldn't
You'd have that on the floor. You need a can which is clean and big enough to contain the oil that's in the sump.
Yeah.
So that if your handbook says you need 8 pints to refill, then you're obviously going to drain 8 pints out. So you want a can big enough to catch that much. So you'll probably find that the sump plug itself is very tight. It's been in there for a while.
Yes.
So just bang it with a
ring spanner.
Ring spanner, a good fitting spanner, either the ring or the sockets that we were using.
Yeah.
You'll find it has a very long thread on it. So it's a question really of positioning the tray and
There she goes.
there we go.
OK.
So now you could leave that tray standing on the ground.
That's right.
And as the oil drains out, you could leave it for 5 or 10 minutes just to let it all
To
drain
make sure
in.
you get every bit of the old oil out. Would you flush a system? I mean, I often hear
No, it's
about
not necessary these days. You know,
No.
we've got detergent oils which suspend all the impurities in the oil. So changing the oil is enough to get rid of all
There's
the
a
bits.
rag for you, because you can wipe that nut off there. And again, I mean, I suppose when you put this back, you want to make sure you don't get any grit on, clean off around
You clean
the
around
area.
all the plugs before you. It's not quite so important here because you're not going to put clean oil in through that hole.
Yeah. The thing is, what happens if this tray fills up now?
It's just about out. That's it.
Oh, it's coming off out, yeah. Good, but so it's a good point here to have a big enough bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, to collect all this waste oil in. OK. I think you better put that in because I'm getting rather full here. That's it. But you drain every drop of that oil.
Yeah, just leave the
out.
plug out and let the thing continue till it absolutely runs dry.
Anything to do with the plug? I mean, there's no little tricks with that plug there?
Well, as I've done, you know, clean the plug down before you put it back. Get the grit out of the thread, which will make it tight.
I'll drop this down.
Put the plug back securely, but not too tight, and then clean off around the the plug again, because we're going to have to check that for leaks after we get the engine running.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, OK, so that's nicely sealed up again there. We've got to notice, Alan, there's a few, well, a sort of a smidgen of oil around here. I mean, is that nothing serious there, do you think?
Well, that isn't. Oil seepage like that you can expect. What you need to be looking for while you're under here is oil dripping off from anywhere. It can be from the steering rack or the brakes, or it can be coolant. But it's all going to find its way to this point. You know, it's going to drip off the lowest point.
Yeah.
So have a good look round. If it's moist like that, then you can fairly well ignore it.
Okay.
But keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
But if you find that there's oil dripping off anywhere, then it needs to be investigated and fixed.
Yeah, you ought to be getting to a garage and that.
Yeah, well, certainly
okay.
you need another opinion on it if you're not satisfied where it's coming from.
And not necessarily that oil coming down from the bottom. It could be, as you say, comes from the top. Well, Alan, what we're going to do now is to lower the car down and put in our fresh oil.
That's right. OK.
It'd be nice to have one of these at home, Alan.
Yes, if you can afford the £6,000, like.
Yeah. Now, the other thing we haven't discussed is all the oil we've taken out. What do you do with that? I mean...
Yeah, well, most local authorities now have got a disposal scheme where they have a tank at the local depot. You know, you take the oil down there and pour it into the tank.
Yes.
You can't paint the fence with it or paint the garden shed, but
yeah, yes.
It is a problem disposing of it.
Dispose of it properly, anyway.
Yeah.
OK, so we're, ready now for putting the oil in?
Right, on the Ford, the fresh oil goes in there, but before you put the new oil in, you need to change the filter. Now, the filter on the Ford engine is down in there. It's difficult to see. It's reasonably easy to change, but to show you how to do it, we'll go over and do it on the Mini engine. OK. Now then, an oil filter. Right, on the Mini, it's down. This is the front of the engine, so it's down, low down on the front side of the engine. Very easy to get at, in fact. All filters these days are a throwaway thing. You unscrew the old one, sling it and put a new one on. You will find, though, that because they've been on there for about 6,000 miles, there's no way you can unscrew that by hand. Yes. You need, again, a little tool, which is simply a strap through a nut. The idea is that the strap goes round the filter, you tighten it up. There's all sorts of different sizes of filters, and then as you turn it, the strap tightens up on the filter and slacks it off. Yeah, that's an inexpensive piece of equipment. So that gets the filter loose, and of course it works on the Ford just as easily. Unscrew the filter down. Remember that it is full of dirty oil. It holds about half a pint. So you screw that thing down, hold it level as you get it off, and then take it away and dispose of it. Yeah? Yep. Okay. Putting it back, it's important to get the proper filter for the engine. They're all marked with a part number. They might look the same, but they've got different capacities. Some of them have valve arrangements in, so get the one for the car that you're running. Yeah. When you put it back, there's no need to pre-fill it with oil. It's going to fill up when you start the engine anyway. But you need a light smear of oil just on the seal. They're all come with instructions anyway on how to change them. But the trick when you're refitting it is to screw it back till it contacts the top, and then give it half a turn. And that's enough. And that's tight enough. Yeah, you don't need to put the tool back on tight. You don't need the tool to get it back on again. OK? So that's all there is really to changing the filter. Yes. Yeah. But while we're down here, the drain plug on the Mini is again on the lower corner, but it's the front lower corner. And on the Mini, because the gearbox, the axle and the engine are all combined and serviced by one oil, the sump plug has a magnet on it. And the idea of that is to catch little bits of metal that could well be floating around inside the engine. In fact, there's a little piece on that one. Yeah, well, that's a good idea. So all the bits of metal that come loose, just normal wear and tear, really, end up on the sump plug. And when you take that out, it could look like a Christmas tree. So you've got to wipe all that off and clean it and put the magnet back clean. That goes back in. And tighten him up. Because you've got an aluminium bottom here, Alan. Yeah, it's an aluminium case or an alloy case, and you need to be particularly careful with tension on the Mini sump plug. In fact, any of the front-wheel drive Leyland engines are the same. 15/16 AF spanner and just tight. Yeah, not over time, because it's easy to strip that thread out. You'll strip it and it'll make it so much more difficult to get out next time you want it out. Yeah, sure. OK. Good. Well, look, while we're talking about filters, before we go on to anything else, it would be a good idea to talk about the air filter, I think, would it not? Well, yes, while we're on to filters, why not? Yeah. And that goes, of course, on the carburettor, over the carburettor. Yeah, they need changing at the same time. This is a sectioned air filter, but that would normally sit on top of the carburettor. And all it is a paper element inside.
You just take the top off?
You take the two halves apart and throw the filter away, and the new filter looks like that. This is the Ford one, but it's just exactly as the same as you can see.
Yeah, you just get the right filter for the right car.
So you change the air filter at the same time as the oil filter.
Yeah, that was a good point, that, Alan, yeah. OK, so having changed those filters, ready to put the oil in?
Yeah, the oil goes in the top.
Of course, goes in the top.
And the oil cap itself is a filter. Yeah. So that needs changing every 12,000 miles because it filters the air that's being drawn back into the engine.
Oh, I see. I didn't realise that.
So that's a throwaway affair as well.
Yeah, so you put a new every 12,000 miles.
Yeah.
Oh, well. OK, right. So oil goes in, and then what? You check your levels, what?
Well, it holds about 5 litres. So you put 4 litres in first of all, and then check it on the dipstick.
Yeah.
And where you need to be is between the minimum and maximum mark. So it's about half a litre between the two. As long as your oil level ends up between the two, that's right. Yeah. You start the engine, it fills the filter, then you top back up again. Yeah. Because that oil level will go down after you start.
Oh, I see. Good. And we're almost ready for the road as far as our lubricant system is concerned. Yeah. But of course, not the only thing that whizzes around the engine, you've got water. And water pumps and thermostat. Let's just turn round, Alan, so that we can see a little bit better here. Now, we've got, what? Now, what have we got to worry about?
The radiators on that end.
Right.
OK? Now, it's a bit different to the Ford in that the air comes through the front and goes back out under the wing on the Mini. So the dirt that gets into the radiator is going to get in from the back.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a drawing,
in fact, here, haven't we? Yes.
Of the radiator. And the air goes through the radiator that way. And the water has to go down the tubes inside the radiator. So you've got two ways you can block the radiator. You can either block the water passages, or you can block the air passages with dirt and bits of grass and straw and all this sort of thing. Yes. So you can clean both ways, in fact, on the radiator. More important, probably, is the water passages. And you can see those, in fact. We've got, again, half a radiator. And the tubes themselves aren't very big. So these are the tubes that we're talking about that run down the radiator, need to be kept clean. And in fact, you do that by, if possible, reversing the flow.
Yes, well, this is to, what, flush out
the
system?
Flush out. The water circulating from the top of the radiator down. What you want to be able to do is introduce water in the bottom of the radiator and flush the dirt up and just let it spill over the top.
Yes, what's the easiest way to do that? I mean,
take a heater hose off and connect your garden hose to the heater hose and just flush backwards through the system.
Take the top off the radiator cap and let the water run through it? Yeah. Oh, that's a useful tip there, Alan.
That'll take care of the cleaning. Yep. Don't be tempted to poke around this with a screwdriver, though.
No.
You need to be very, very careful and do it with a foot pump or airline.
Blow it out there.
And blow the dirt out. Don't poke it out.
Because I know a lot of people have trouble with thermostats. I know the thermostat lives in that little point there.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can tell us something about that and of what sort of problems we're liable to.
Most thermostats should fail safe. In other words, if they're going to pack up, they're going to pack up so that it doesn't make the car stop. Take the top off. There's a new gasket required every time you have it off, and that gets you out to the thermostat. You'll see if that one's failed because that little dome will be open. So the water can circulate. It does two jobs, really. When the engine is started from cold, the thermostat's closed. So the water is confined to the engine block. So as the engine runs, it heats up just the engine gets to temperature, the thermostat opens, and it allows the water to go through the radiator. The other thing it does, when it has opened, it holds the engine temperature at a constant 88 degrees in this case. So that if the thermostat does fail and fails open, it means that the engine doesn't, A, get up to working temperature, and B, doesn't get to as efficient as it should be. So, it has an effect in fuel consumption and all sorts of things.
And also putting new gaskets back
every time.
Yeah. Because all this is driven, I mean, the water is circulated by the pump, isn't it? Which really runs off our fan belt, and that's something that always seems to be going wrong. Fan belts breaking and incorrect tensions and things on.
That's
right. Now, what is the correct engine? I mean, how do we tell that?
Well, it differs. This engine, as you can see, is fitted with an alternator. And you recognise the difference. The dynamo's longer, but it's mounted in the same place.
Yes.
With an alternator adjustment, the belt needs to be tighter with an alternator because it's more efficient. And to adjust it, you need to slack off 2 bolts at the top and a bolt at the bottom.
Yes, this is on the adjusting arm.
That slot is the adjustment arm. So, in fact, slack it off by pushing it down and tighten it by pulling it up.
Yes. Yeah.
So that has to be very, very tight. In other words, so that there isn't any deflection on the top run of the belt.
Yes. Any reason for this being a notch belt? I mean, we get the plain, common
well, that belt you use on
there.
a dynamo, this one, the alternator pulley is always smaller. So the belt has to go around a smaller radius So you have to have the notches on the inside to allow the belt to close up round the pulley.
Oh, I see. And this would be used, what, on a dynamo?
That's a dynamo
yes.
belt. That's an alternator belt.
Yes, the dynamo is on what, earlier cars?
Earlier minis, yeah. The dynamo was fitted on the Mini from 58 until probably 74, 75.
Yeah.
And then the P-registered Mini we've got, of course, has an alternator on.
Oh, I see. So, and of course the other good thing is always to have a spare fan belt with you.
Yeah.
Thing that can break.
Yes.
Well, there we are. That's a lot I've learned. Anyway, and I hope you have too. In the next programme, we're going to be dealing with something quite serious, and that's brakes and adjusting and also replacing of brake shoes and brake lines. So until next time, bye-bye now.
A book and a video cassette of this series are now available. The book is on sale at AA shops, newsagents and bookshops, or can be obtained by post for £5.50. The cassette can be obtained by sending a cheque or postal order made out to Yorkshire Television for £25.90 to Me and My Car, Admail 1, Leeds LS3 1YS.